What would you do if one late-night favor changed everything? A simple knock at the door, a best friend asking for help. But waiting in the shadows was someone else, someone forbidden, his older brother. Dramatic pause. What started as kindness turned into a moment neither of them could forget. This is not just a BL webtoon trope. It's a yaoi romance, a manhwa love story about temptation, secrets, and the kind of love that rewrites fate. The story begins in a quiet suburban neighborhood, a place where the days move gently, where every front lawn seemed trimmed the same, and every driveway whispered of routine. Streetlights flickered awake at dusk, casting halos over sidewalks, and the sound of children's bicycles rattling against the pavement lingered in the warm air before fading into night. Ethan had lived here his whole life. For him, the neighborhood was a tapestry of memories stitched together with familiarity, each house carrying echoes of the past, each corner tied to some version of himself. The corner store where he bought his first comic book, the schoolyard fence where he and his best friend carved their initials, the library steps where he once spent an entire summer lost in novels while cicadas hummed in the background. At 20, Ethan was a university student majoring in literature. He was the kind of boy who noticed details others missed. The creak of a stair when someone snuck home late, the flicker of unease in a person's eyes before they spoke, the way silence itself could sometimes weigh more than words. His professors often praised him for reading between the lines. But in truth, Ethan didn't just do it with books. He did it with people. And sometimes that sensitivity was both a gift and a curse. Of all the constants in Ethan's life, one stood tallest. Noah, his best friend, his anchor. They had known each other since childhood, back when scraped knees and trading Pokemon cards felt like the biggest problems in the world. Noah had always been the loud one, the spark in every room, the boy whose laughter carried across playgrounds and made strangers smile without knowing why. Ethan, by contrast, was quieter, thoughtful, the steady balance to Noah's unpredictability. Their friendship was stitched together through 1,000 little moments. Summers spent building blanket forts in Ethan's living room, whispering ghost stories until the early hours. Winters of sledding down the same hill, until their faces burned red and their gloves were soaked through. The times Noah would show up at Ethan's doorstep in the middle of the night, too wired from a fight with his brother or his parents, asking simply, "Can I crash here?" Ethan always said yes. In high school, when exams loomed, Noah would panic last minute, calling Ethan for help. Ethan would roll his eyes, scolding him, but still show up with his neatly organized notes. When Ethan struggled with confidence, Noah was the one who shoved him onto the stage at the school play audition, declaring, "You'll thank me later." They balanced each other perfectly, like sunlight and shadow. Noah was funny, impulsive, always needing help with last-minute projects or forgotten homework. He had a way of pulling Ethan out of his shell, forcing him into adventures he'd never choose for himself. "We'll only live once," Noah would say, grinning, before dragging Ethan into yet another spontaneous trip, whether it was midnight drives with no destination or sneaking into the local swimming pool just to float under the stars. But what Ethan never said, what he never admitted even to himself fully, was that sometimes, in the quiet moments, he wondered if his devotion to Noah ran deeper than friendship. Because if friendship was a thread, what they shared often felt like a knot, impossible to untangle, impossible to define. Yet, hovering at the edges of their bond was something else, someone else. Noah's older brother, Daniel. Daniel was 4 years older, a presence Ethan had grown up around but never grown close to. To kids, 4 years felt like a chasm. Daniel was already in middle school when they were still trading stickers, already looking at college brochures when they were fumbling through algebra. He was the older brother who hovered in the background at birthday parties. The figure Ethan noticed more than he'd admit. When Noah was fire, Daniel was stone. If Noah scattered energy everywhere, Daniel collected it steady, controlled. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, a posture that suggested discipline, a voice that rarely needed to rise in order to be heard. If Noah's chaos made him magnetic, Daniel's composure made him commanding. In Ethan's memories, Daniel was always just beyond reach. Never cruel, but never especially warm either. He'd pat Noah on the head, roll his eyes at their antics, and retreat back to his room with a stack of textbooks or headphones. To Ethan, he was a mystery, the boy who seemed to live in another world, one of ambition and seriousness. It wasn't until Ethan grew older that he began to notice details he'd missed before. The way Daniel's presence seemed to shift a room, the way his words lingered longer than they should. Ethan would catch himself watching him, tracing the sharp line of his jaw, the way his eyes narrowed slightly when he was thinking. It was something Ethan didn't want to think about, but couldn't quite push away. Still, none of that mattered in the present, or so Ethan told himself. Because at the center of his story was Noah, always Noah. That night, it began with something simple, as it often did. Ethan had been reading in his room when his phone buzzed. A message from Noah lit up the screen. "Bro, emergency. Please help. I'm dying here." Ethan sighed, already knowing what it was about. Another last-minute project. Another paper due the next morning. And sure enough, when he answered the call, Noah's panicked voice tumbled through the speaker. "Ethan, please, I swear I didn't realize how much work this was. Just come over. You're the only one who can save me." Ethan rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Noah, it's midnight. I'll owe you forever. You already owe me forever. Then you'll get eternal forever." Ethan laughed despite himself. "That's not even a thing. Please," Noah whined, stretching the word into 3 syllables. "Just this once." "Okay, maybe not just this once, but this is serious. I need you." Ethan hesitated only for a second. He knew he'd say yes. He always said yes, because for all Noah's chaos, Ethan couldn't bring himself to refuse him. Throwing on a jacket and tucking his laptop under his arm, Ethan stepped out into the night. The streets were empty, bathed in the pale glow of street lamps. His bike carried him through the quiet, the tires humming against the pavement as the world slept around him. By the time he arrived at Noah's house, the lights inside were still on. He knocked once before letting himself in, the kind of familiarity only years of friendship allowed. Noah was in the living room, surrounded by scattered papers and energy drink cans, hair sticking up in all directions. "Finally," he exclaimed, "my savior." Ethan shook his head, suppressing a smile. "You're impossible." Together, they dove into the project, Ethan typing furiously while Noah paced and dictated half-baked ideas. Hours stretched into a blur until Noah's energy finally waned. His words slurred, his eyes drooped, and before long, he was curled up on the couch, fast asleep. Ethan sat back, watching him with fond exasperation. Typical. He grabbed a blanket from the closet, returning to drape it gently over Noah's sleeping form. For a moment, Ethan lingered there, studying his best friend's peaceful expression. The boy who had been his constant for as long as he could remember. But when he turned to leave, he wasn't alone. In the dim glow of the kitchen light, someone else stood awake. Daniel. Leaning against the counter with a glass of water, his figure half in shadow, eyes fixed directly on Ethan. And in that moment, Ethan realized the night would not unfold as simply as he thought. And then there's Daniel, Noah's older brother, 24, a medical student, disciplined, distant. If Noah is the firecracker of the family, Daniel is the stone wall, steady, unyielding, intimidating. When Noah babbles, Daniel speaks with precision. When Noah stumbles, Daniel seems untouchable. For years, Ethan saw Daniel only in passing, at birthday parties, family gatherings, the occasional walk home. To Ethan, Daniel was just the older brother until recently, until Ethan realized his gaze lingered longer than it should, until he started to notice the way Daniel's shoulders filled a doorway, the quiet gravity in his voice. That night, it began with something simple. The call came just after midnight. Ethan had been sprawled across his bed, laptop balanced on his knees, a half-read novel lying abandoned at his side. The world outside was quiet, too quiet for someone who thrived on small noises. The creak of a stair, the hum of a passing car, the muffled laughter of neighbors through thin walls. But then, his phone buzzed violently against the nightstand, and the silence shattered. He didn't need to check the caller ID. Only one person would call him at such an hour. "Noah," Ethan muttered under his breath, answering with a sigh. "Please, man, I need your help." Noah's voice came through in a rush, panicked and urgent. "It's this stupid class project. I don't even know where to start. It's due tomorrow. Tomorrow, Ethan. You're the only one I trust with this." Ethan sat up, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You're serious? It's midnight." "Serious as a heart attack. Bro, if you don't come, I'm doomed. My GPA will flatline, my future gone." Despite himself, Ethan laughed softly. "You're so dramatic." "I'm desperate," Noah corrected. "Please, Ethan, you're my lifeline here." And just like that, Ethan knew he'd say yes. He always did. Friendship came first. Always had. Always would. Noah had been the loud constant in his quiet life. And no matter how ridiculous the favor, Ethan never truly considered saying no. Within minutes, Ethan was on his feet. He tugged on a jacket, slid his laptop into his bag, and stepped out into the cool night. The streets of the suburban neighborhood were hushed, bathed in the yellow glow of street lamps. He mounted his bike and pedaled through the sleeping streets, the tires humming softly against the pavement. The air smelled faintly of rain, sharp and metallic, carrying with it the distant rustle of leaves. When he reached Noah's house, the windows were still lit. The place looked the same as it always had. 2 stories, slightly worn shutters, the porch light flickering in a way that suggested no one had bothered to fix it in years. Ethan knocked once before letting himself in, the kind of familiarity born from a lifetime of friendship. Inside, chaos reigned. Papers were scattered across the living room floor like fallen leaves. Empty energy drink cans perched precariously on the coffee table. And in the middle of it all, Noah. Hair sticking up in every direction, eyes wide with panic, pacing like a trapped animal. "Finally," Noah exclaimed when he saw Ethan, "my savior." Ethan shook his head, suppressing a smile. "You're impossible. Correction, I'm irresponsible. But that's why you're here. Balance, man. Your balance." Ethan sighed, setting his bag down. "Let me guess, you haven't even started." "I made a title, page," Noah said sheepishly, holding up a single sheet of paper. Ethan groaned. Unbelievable. But he sat down anyway, flipping open his laptop. Within minutes, the rhythm between them fell into place. Noah dictated half-baked ideas, while Ethan typed, organized, polished. They argued playfully over word choices, laughed at stupid tangents, and for a while, it felt like high school again. Two boys huddled over textbooks, the rest of the world fading away. Time slipped by unnoticed, until Noah's voice began to slur. Bro, you're a lifesaver, he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. His pacing slowed, his body sagging under the weight of exhaustion. Within minutes, he collapsed onto the couch, curling up without ceremony. His chest rose and fell steadily, his breathing soft and even. Ethan paused, staring at him. Typical. Shaking his head, Ethan rose quietly. He rummaged through the closet in the hallway until he found a blanket. Returning to the living room, he draped it carefully over Noah's sleeping form. For a moment, he lingered. His eyes softened as he studied the boy who had been his anchor for so many years. Even in sleep, Noah radiated warmth, his presence filling the room like sunlight. But when Ethan finally turned away, intending to slip quietly into the kitchen for a glass of water, he realized he wasn't alone. Someone else was awake. Daniel. Noah's older brother leaned against the kitchen counter, half in shadow, a glass of water in hand. The dim light from the stove's clock cast sharp lines across his face. Jaw defined, expression unreadable. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he'd just woken up, but his eyes were alert, fixed directly on Ethan. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. The silence between them felt heavier than words. Ethan swallowed. Sorry. I didn't mean to wake anyone. You didn't, Daniel replied, his voice low, steady. He tilted the glass slightly, water catching the light. I don't sleep much these days. Ethan nodded awkwardly. He had known Daniel for years, seen him at birthdays, holiday dinners, backyard barbecues, but never like this. Never standing in the half-dark of a kitchen, the world outside asleep, with only the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Daniel had always been a presence more than a person in Ethan's mind. The older brother, the figure who hovered at the edges of Noah's life. Older, distant, the kind of man who seemed untouchable, self-contained in a way that made it impossible to imagine what went on in his head. Ethan had noticed him, of course. How could he not? But noticing and knowing were two very different things. And now, with Daniel's gaze fixed so intently on him, Ethan felt laid bare, exposed, as if every flicker of thought, every unspoken insecurity, was etched clearly across his skin. He shifted on his feet, gripping the strap of his laptop bag, tighter, wishing he had something to do with his hands. I didn't mean to intrude, Ethan said at last, his voice softer than he intended. Noah called me over. He needed help. Daniel's expression didn't change, but his eyes did, narrowing slightly, then relaxing again, like the words had stirred something he chose not to voice. You always come when he calls, Daniel said. His tone wasn't accusing, but it wasn't neutral either. It was a statement threaded with something heavier, something Ethan couldn't name. Ethan managed a small laugh, though it came out tight. That's what best friends do, right? Daniel leaned back against the counter, crossing his arms. The movement made his shoulders seem broader, his presence larger, like he filled not just the kitchen, but the air between them. Maybe, but not everyone would drop everything at midnight for someone else. Ethan's throat felt dry. He turned his gaze to the floor tiles, tracing the lines between them, anything to avoid the sharp intensity in Daniel's eyes. It's nothing, he said, but even he could hear the weakness in his protest. Doesn't look like nothing, Daniel murmured. The words hung there, lingering, echoing in ways Ethan didn't want to acknowledge. He shifted again, uneasy under the weight of silence. I should, Ethan started, but the sentence caught in his throat. He didn't know how to finish it. I should get back to the project. Noah was asleep. I should go home. It felt abrupt, like running away. Daniel didn't move, didn't step aside to make it easier. Instead, he tilted his head, studying Ethan with that same unreadable focus. You're different when Noah's not around. The statement made Ethan freeze. His pulse skipped, then thudded faster, echoing in his ears. He glanced up, meeting Daniel's gaze before quickly looking away again. What do you mean? Daniel's lips quirked. Not quite a smile, not quite a smirk, but something caught between. Quieter, more careful, like you're holding back. Ethan's breath caught. He didn't know what to say to that. Maybe because Daniel wasn't wrong. With Noah, he could play the role he'd always played, the dependable one, the quiet balance to chaos. But here, alone under Daniel's gaze, there was no script, no familiarity to hide behind. It was just him. I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan said finally. Though his voice betrayed him with its unevenness, Daniel's eyes softened, though only slightly. You don't have to. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls had leaned in closer, as if the air itself had thickened. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, loud and insistent, matching the quiet hum of the refrigerator. He should move. He should leave. That would be the sensible thing. But his feet remained rooted to the floor, his body unwilling to obey his mind. Daniel pushed away from the counter, stepping closer, not much, just enough that Ethan could feel the subtle shift in the air, the faint brush of warmth where their personal spaces collided. You're a good friend to him, Daniel said, his voice low, steady. Maybe too good. Ethan's eyes snapped up, startled. Too good? Daniel held his gaze. He takes you for granted. The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were too close to the truth Ethan avoided admitting. How many times had Noah called him at the last minute, knowing Ethan would always come? How many times had Ethan sacrificed his own time, his own comfort, just to keep Noah afloat? But hearing it from Daniel's lips was different. He felt stripped bare. The part of himself he'd kept hidden suddenly dragged into the open. You don't know him like I do, Ethan said, though the protest sounded weak even to his own ears. Daniel's expression didn't waver. Maybe not, but I know what I see. Ethan's chest tightened, his breath unsteady. The silence between them stretched, heavy, unrelenting. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice softer this time. You deserve someone who sees you. The words pierced through Ethan like a blade. Simple, quiet, but devastating. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his mind racing with thoughts he didn't dare linger on. Ethan began. But the words failed him. What could he say? That no one had ever said something like that to him before. That being seen, not just as Noah's friend, not just as the reliable one, but as himself, felt terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Daniel didn't press. He simply watched, his gaze steady, unflinching, as though he could wait forever for Ethan to find his words. And maybe that was what unsettled Ethan most of all, because for the first time in years, he wasn't sure what role he was supposed to play. Ethan gestured toward the couch. Noah fell asleep. I wanted to cover him. Daniel's eyes flicked briefly toward the living room, then back to Ethan. You always take care of him. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even a question. Just an observation. But the weight of it made Ethan's chest tighten. He'd do the same for me, Ethan murmured, though even as he said it, he wasn't entirely sure it was true. Daniel set his glass down on the counter with a quiet click. Maybe. Another silence stretched between them, charged, unsteady. Ethan shifted, suddenly hyper-aware of the distance, or lack thereof, between them. The kitchen felt smaller than it ever had, the air thicker. "I should probably get back to the project," Ethan said, though his voice lacked conviction. Daniel didn't move. His gaze lingered, steady, unreadable. There was something in it Ethan couldn't name, something that made his pulse quicken. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "You're good for him. You know that, right?" The words were simple, but they carried weight. Too much weight. Ethan forced a small smile. "He's my best friend. It's not really about being good for him. It's just who we are." Daniel studied him for a moment longer, and then nodded slowly, as though tucking away an answer to a question he hadn't asked out loud. Ethan turned, retreating toward the couch. But as he passed Daniel, his shoulder brushed against Daniel's arm, barely, lightly, but enough to spark something that lingered long after the contact ended. Back in the living room, Ethan sank into the chair beside the couch, heart beating faster than it should. Noah slept on, oblivious. The project remained unfinished, papers still scattered across the floor, but Ethan's thoughts weren't on the project anymore. They weren't even on Noah. They were on Daniel, the way his eyes had lingered, the way his words had settled, the way silence itself had seemed to bend around him. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan wondered if his night had just taken a turn he couldn't have predicted. Because in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a glass of water, was Daniel. And that was the moment everything changed. The kitchen light was dim, casting Daniel in half shadow. His hair was slightly tousled, as though he'd just woken from a restless sleep. His grey t-shirt clung to his frame, simple, casual, but on him it looked almost cinematic. Ethan froze at the doorway, clutching the folded blanket against his chest. Daniel looked up. His eyes, dark, steady, met Ethan's. "You're still here," Ethan swallowed. "Noah." He fell asleep. "I was just—" He lifted the blanket awkwardly, making sure he's comfortable. A pause. Daniel set his glass down, the faint clink echoing in the silence. "You always take care of him." Ethan wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an observation. "He's my best friend," he said softly. Daniel's gaze lingered, unreadable. Then he pushed off the counter and crossed the room, the faint creak of the wooden floor making Ethan's pulse quicken. Daniel stopped just a step too close, enough that Ethan could feel the warmth radiating off him. "You're good at it," Daniel murmured. The words shouldn't have meant much, but from him, from Daniel, they felt heavier. Ethan's heart hammered. He tried to step back, but the counter pressed against his spine. His voice came out lower than he intended. You should get some rest. Long day tomorrow, right?" Daniel tilted his head, studying him like a puzzle. "You're nervous." Ethan blinked. "I'm not." "Yes, you are." Daniel's tone wasn't mocking. It was factual, as if he were diagnosing a symptom. Ethan's cheeks burned. "Maybe because you're standing too close." That made Daniel's lips curve, not quite a smile, but close. "Interesting." The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Somewhere in the house, the clock ticked softly, each second louder than the last. Finally, Daniel stepped back, breaking the spell. "Good night, Ethan." But as he turned away, his hand brushed lightly against Ethan's arm, barely a touch. Yet Ethan felt it all the way to his chest. That was the beginning. The following days grew stranger. Ethan told himself it was nothing, just a late-night misunderstanding. But every time he came over, Daniel was there, watching, waiting. Sometimes he'd make small comments. "You're more patient with Noah than I could ever be. You stay up late too often. Don't burn yourself out. You always notice details others don't." Each line felt harmless, but together they built a tension Ethan couldn't ignore. And then came the turning point. One evening, while Noah was in the shower, Ethan sat in the living room scrolling through his notes. Daniel entered quietly, settling on the armchair across from him. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of water. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan frowned. "Regret what?" "Being so close to him. Always the friend, never the brother." Ethan's breath hitched. The question cut deeper than he expected. He didn't answer right away, afraid of revealing too much. Daniel leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. His voice dropped. "You're loyal to him, but sometimes I wonder if you're hiding something. Something you want for yourself." Ethan's chest tightened. He forced a laugh. "You think too much." Daniel didn't smile. His eyes stayed locked on Ethan, sharp, unyielding. "Maybe. Or maybe you don't think enough." The sound of the shower shutting off broke the moment. Noah returned, oblivious, carrying on about homework deadlines. Ethan barely heard him. His pulse was still tangled in Daniel's words. From that night, Ethan could no longer deny it. He was caught in something dangerous, something that had begun long before he admitted it to himself. It happened late again. Another project, another midnight. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch, his breathing steady. Ethan pulled the blanket over him, the familiar ritual now bittersweet. When he turned, Daniel was standing in the doorway, silent, watching. Their eyes met. The air thickened. Daniel stepped closer, each movement deliberate. Ethan didn't move. Couldn't. "You're too kind," Daniel whispered. "Too loyal. To him. To everyone." "But what about you, Ethan? What do you want?" Ethan's throat tightened. I don't." Daniel closed the distance, stopping just inches away. His hand lifted, hovering near Ethan's cheek but not touching. "If I cross this line, would you stop me?" Ethan's breath trembled. He knew he should. He knew it was wrong. But his silence spoke louder than any words. And in that silence, Daniel leaned in. The kiss was not rushed. It was deliberate, deep, a question and an answer all at once. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides, torn between resistance and surrender. When they finally broke apart, Ethan's chest heaved. His voice was barely a whisper. "This can't." Daniel's reply was steady. "It already has." The days after were complicated. Ethan avoided Noah's calls, guilt weighing heavy. Yet he couldn't erase the memory of Daniel's touch, the truth it revealed. Love is rarely simple in BL webtoons, yaoi manhwa, or romance manga. It is messy, forbidden, full of choices that test the heart. Ethan realized his story was no different. He wasn't just the best friend anymore. He was someone standing at a crossroads, between loyalty and desire, between fear and truth. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. That night had changed him. Forever. So what did you feel watching this? Was it sweet, emotional, or heartbreaking? Comment below your reaction. I want to know if you choose loyalty or love. And don't forget to subscribe for more BL story breakdowns, yaoi manhwa summaries, and romance webtoon adaptations. Check the description for full story links and more BL recommendations.